I'll hand you over to Richard. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Keith. Good afternoon to everyone, and a very warm welcome. Also, if this is your first time in Rochdale, I want to wish you a very warm welcome to Rochdale. If I think back to my experiences of the internet, well, I first heard the word internet about 15 years ago, so 1995. Never heard it before, and sort of sounded quite interesting. This idea of a network that would span the globe. And so my brother Daniel knew a little bit about the internet because he'd used it at university. He was at university at the time. And as with all good stories, they start off down the pub. So me and Daniel had a chat about the internet, and I remember asking him specifically, do you think it'll take off? And he thought, yes, it would. And so I said, well, do you think, how about we build an internet service provider business? And at the time I was a software contractor, so I'd saved up a few £1,000, and we thought, right, okay, let's build an ISP. So that's what we did. And what did we build? Well, we built this. And this is our first core internet network. So what did you need 15 years ago to build an internet service? Okay, well, first of all, you need a core router. So here it is, 386SX-PC with a bit of code on it. You need a hub. So this was way before the days that the glamour of switches came onto our network. You need a couple of old PCs running Linux. And you need your edge network. So here's our edge network up here. 6 US Robotics courier modems and some phone lines. Critically, you need a wooden IKEA shelf to put all this stuff on. And you also, of course, need a connection to the internet. And back then, BTnet, as it was called then, sold us a 64 kilobits per second internet lease line. And we launched the business based on this network. And this was one of the adverts that we ran in a publication back then called Internet Today. So this was January 1996. And you can see that even back then we were advertising our high-speed network and, of course, our great service. A couple of things sort of notable about this ad as well is that we were the first ISP in the UK to offer a whole 1 megabyte of web space. And our nearest rival, I think, was Demon, who offered a paltry 250 kilobytes of web space. The other thing sort of notable back then is that for us, these were the days before the national local rate numbers. So in those old days, you had 3 telephone rates from BT. You had your local calls, your regional calls, and your national calls. And because we were supplying dial-up access, then only the local rate area was our catchment area, which is this map. So we could provide services as far north as Earby, as far south as Altrincham, but the whole rest of the UK was really beyond our reach. Another story, our first experience of generator power backup. And I know some of you have been on a tour. I don't know if that tour has included our generator room here, but this was our first experience. So we'd been running for a couple of years, and of course we did have UPSs by that time, but I remember one particular power cut that we had, and the LEDs on the UPS, they start off at 5, and then they go down to 2, and the power's still not come back on, and we're thinking what we're going to do. We start shutting down our non-essential servers, and luckily there was a plant hire shop just up the road from us, so we ran up the road and we hired a generator, not dissimilar to this one, and then we ran a mains cable out from the pavement into our server room, and that kept the service running until the power came back on. Another interesting story back then, ManApp. This was the brainchild originally of a guy called Mike Kelly, who was working at Manchester University at the time, and working together with guy called Bill Unsworth, who headed up UNET at the time, an ISP over in Warrington. And the idea being that, okay, Links was, first of all, it was in London. Secondly, it was quite a big deal for small ISPs to join the Links back then. And we thought, let's have something that's based up in Manchester, a peering point that the smaller ISPs can benefit from. So we ended up setting up Manap, and myself, a guy called Jim Dixon from VBC Net, Bill Unsworth from UNET were the original three directors of Manap back then. Mike Kelly, interesting story of course with him, left Manchester University and got some funding from 3i to set up Telecity, which has obviously become a very big business since then. Another thing in 1997, so 2 years in, we became a ripe local internet registry. Up until then we just used IP addresses from BT. And now one of the things I guess that I feared from the beginning of setting up Zen is here were we selling £10 a month internet dial accounts. And I thought, well, one of these days, you know, probably Microsoft or BT are going to think, yeah, this internet thing is really interesting and we want to take over the market. So let's just give it away free for a while. All the little players will just go out of business and then we can do what we want. It wasn't BT or Microsoft in the end, it was Dixon's, and they launched in 1998 with FreeServe. And so almost our worst fear had become reality. Quite soon after the launch, our phones got busier and busier with customers ringing in and saying, well, no, I can't justify £10 a month when I can get the same service for free. And so we started cancelling off of the accounts. But what happened next, I didn't foresee, which was the year following 1998 was our first really big profitable year. We more than doubled turnover from about £430,000 to £930,000. We made our first proper profit of just under £100,000. And there was a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, the advent of FreeServe meant that a lot of our home user residential customers tended to just swap over to FreeServe, whereas a lot of the business customers that wanted a bit more of a guaranteed service, maybe they had ISDN, maybe they had a domain name, maybe they had a website with us, those were the ones that tended to make us the bigger profits, and so our limited resources were focusing much more on a profitable area of the market. And the second thing is that FreeServe really does us a favour, is the advent of FreeServe really expanded the use of the internet in the UK. So with so many people, more people using the internet, there's so many more businesses saw the internet as a key tool for them, and so that really drove demand for the services that we were selling. So it's an interesting story because what we originally saw as a threat was a really good opportunity for us in the end. Next I've got a bit of quiz for the group. Anybody recognise this? Yes, well done. Yeah, spot on. Top marks. It's of course a US Robotics total control chassis, and this was the Betamax of 56k standards, and for us something that ended up as about a £25,000 doorstop. So back then, of course, two competing technologies for 56k, the one that we backed and the one and the VHS, shall we say. So yeah, we swapped that out and we bought some Cisco AS5300s, and to this day they're still working for us. Not all of them actually. A little bit about our offices. This is where we started, the Rochdale Enterprise Generation Centre, and we over the first 6 years of our life as a business we took on additional offices in that building until we got to about 30 staff. It was sort of fortunate that the office next to mine housed an architect business, just one guy, and him and a colleague of his, we got talking and we thought, well, you know, what we could really do with is something nice and high-tech. We found a bit of land in Rochdale, and after about 4 years of effort, we built HQ, which was, we moved into, say, 2001 with about 30 staff. The building had about capacity for 65. And we filled that up in a year and a half, 2 years. And took on a second building. This was just a lease. We took just one floor of this building in the centre of Rochdale. Once we'd filled that up, we took on space in a third shared office building. We ended up occupying about 1/3 of this building, Globe House as it was called. It wasn't too far from our original HQ. So during all this time, we were thinking, well, you know, it's fine, we've got room to expand, but managing a company or organisation over 3 different sites had its challenges, and we thought, well, you know, we've benefited from the success of building our own building once, so let's try and do the same again. And we found a plot on Kingsway Business Park, and we started actually architects' works to build something much bigger, really repeating the success of the previous building. And then we got very lucky because this building that we sat in now became free. So it was built back in '96 by the Co-op. It was bought by My Travel, and then 3 years ago now, Thomas Cook bought My Travel. They relocated the head office operations to Peterborough. So this building became free, and we bought it from My Travel. And certainly for us, it's an absolutely fantastic building. We paid about £20 million for it altogether, and it really is an absolute bargain for us. And we'll be in here for a long time to come, many years, decades, I'm absolutely certain of it. Couldn't do a talk about Zen without mentioning broadband, and what I'll show you here is a graph of our turnover. So we launched broadband in 2000, so summer of 2000, and at that time we were turning over about £1 million a year as a company, and our growth over the last 9 years has really been on the back of broadband, especially in these early years. I know we really rode the wave, I suppose, of the growth in broadband, and in later years sort of diversifying our services into things like leased circuits, Ethernet, IPVPN, hosting, and the other services that we're providing now. So broadband not only propelling our company forward, but also giving us the ability to reach customers across the UK, very much thanks to BT's infrastructure. The other thing that we've seen in the industry, a lot of consolidation. So if I look back to those early years of broadband, so the early years of the millennium, pretty much all, in fact, of our old adversaries, and companies like Nildram, PlusNet, Eclipse, Freedom to Serve, all being gobbled up by larger players, by big public companies. And I think from my point of view, I'm absolutely committed that that will never happen to Zen. And the reason that I'm so passionate about Zen not becoming part of a big public company is that it would undermine the most important and most fundamental values that I have for this company. And so I just want to finish by saying what those values are, and very, very easy to summarise on a couple of slides. So, number one, our most fundamental long-term objectives in order of priority are, number one, happy staff, number two, happy customers, number three, happy suppliers. And everything that we do as a business is built upon those three most fundamental objectives. Yes, of course, we've got to make a profit, because we wouldn't survive and we wouldn't be able to fulfill these objectives long term without making a profit. But profit is a way of supporting these objectives rather than being the primary objective in itself. It's a very, very sort of key fundamental difference then. And finally, our mission is to provide the best ISP service in the UK. So that concludes my brief chat. If anyone's got any questions, I'd be delighted to do my best to answer.
Where does the name come from?
The name, okay, when I was at school, so 13, 14-year-old, I was really into electronics, and I wanted to find out, you know, I wanted to get data sheets from suppliers and stuff like that. Of course, suppliers don't want to send data sheets on their little transistors and integrated circuits to a schoolboy. So I invented a company name, which was Zen Microsystems, sort of loosely based on Sun Microsystems. Now, I'm half Chinese, so that's where the Zen came from. When I actually came to set up as a software contractor, I was trying to think of a company name, and I had 3 or 4 possibilities. And of all of them, you know, I showed it to a few colleagues and friends, and they all said, "Oh, Zen Microsystems, that really sounds the best of all the other ones." I had some pretty duff ones, to be honest. And so, in '95, when we set up the internet business, Zen Internet just seemed a natural choice. So yeah, that's where it came from. Anyone else?
So sorry, Keith Mitchell. What's been the most fun? What's been the one of the most fun things that you've done?
Well, throwing myself off the top of hills, that's really good fun. But in terms of work, what's been the most fun? I think it's really difficult to put my finger on like a single thing, but
it's all been fun, I hope.
It's all been fun. I think it's been fulfilling, and especially in the later years. You know, the early years were just about working all the time, and the later years, I think that seeing some of the results of that work, and also being able to sort of see. I don't know, to sort of see what we've achieved as an organisation, getting feedback from people who are saying, you know, they like working here, getting feedback from some of the local community that we try and help out, saying, yeah, thanks for helping us out, you know, that's really fulfilling. But yeah, I think overall I really enjoy my job.
Great. Okay, any other questions?
Okay, thanks. Hi, Richard. Mike
Hi.
Hughes, Links. Just as I'm a northerner myself, but I defected to the south a long time ago.
Boo.
Yeah, I know. One thing that I think you still have been, I think it's always there underneath is the northern heritage, and there's still the northern focus in your service. You know, you go back to your map where you get up to Bacup and Clitheroe and places like that. You still sort of kept that very local. What sort of things do you do to sort of give back to the community in terms of community stuff then? Because you did just touch on that a minute ago.
Yeah, we do quite a lot of stuff with the local schools. So outside of Zen, I personally have got a couple of responsibilities. I'm the chairman of Groundwork Alderman Rochdale organisation, focuses very much on getting people, for example, on incapacity benefit back into work, making environmental improvements in tends to be the inner town areas for the good of the community. And I'm also the chair on a trust school called Spring Hill High School, and helping them out with things like mentoring and with school placements within the workplace. And then we do a number of ad hoc things. Like we built an IT room for a good cause a few years ago. So it's as and when, really, as and when we can sort of help out. But also I'm involved in a project right now that's aimed at getting people from across the borough together just to do all sorts of things to improve Rochdale. So very much focused on the town and trying to get, I suppose my thinking is there's a lot of people with goodwill who, given the opportunity, would be happy to give up, say, a couple of hours of their time to benefit the local community, but nobody's telling them what to do. So I think there's an opportunity there to set up an organisation that says if you have got a bit of spare time, you know, if you have got the willingness to put something back, then actually here's something that you can do. And so I'm in the very early stages of trying to get something together like that.
Thanks. One other comment as well was you were talking about VHS versus Betamax with respect to 56K.
Yes.
My own little story of that, I was actually the network engineer at Dircon, Direct Connection, that used to run the access network there in, 96, 97. And we put in Ascend Max 6000, so we went with VHS at the time. Last time I spoke to Dave Friedman, who's running the network at Clarinet, which took over Dircon. They're still there pretty much as I configured them, and they don't really touch them, because if they try and change the config, they stop working.
Some good knowledge sharing going on there then. And your consultancy rate is?
I work for a non-profit corporation, and Clarinet are one of our members, so you know, I've got to be very nice to them. We have steel shelving, not wooden.
Yeah, we moved on to steel, but you know, you've got to start small.
Yeah, Gavin Brown from Central Link. My question is, what's next for your company, and what's next for the industry, do you think, for your particular industry?
Okay, I think next for the company is, well, a couple of things. I guess we've got to the size where we're able to win bigger contracts now, and so a lot of it actually is due to be in this building. And it's interesting that although it's the same group of people, the fact that we're in this building, we know makes the difference for some clients who would come to our old building, and you know, despite it being nice looking, they think, you know, it's just not quite big enough as an organisation. Here sort of gives a slightly different impression. So we've been successful recently in winning a couple of contracts of over £1 million. So I think going forwards, we've got an opportunity as a business to win more of that sort of business. And so we're doing a lot to sort of set up our service offering to make a really good service for that sort of customer. That's one opportunity. I still think that the biggest of the UK companies will not yet consider us seriously as a supplier. So if you look at, say, I know the head of IT for Barclays, if they want to roll out an IPVPN across the UK, would they come to Zen today? No, I don't think they would. I don't think we're quite there. I would hope that 3 to 5 years' time we will be in a position to be able to compete for that sort of work. The other things that we're doing as a company is continuing to expand the range of services that we offer. So on the hosting side, we've got lots of plans to launch things like virtual servers and other dedicated servers. And telephony side, that's an area that we're really just dipping our toes into at the moment. Again, we've got sort of bigger plans to launch a range of telephony solutions. Fibre to the cabinet, we'll be doing that coming up later this year. So in terms of the industry as a whole, I guess continuing to get faster, fibre to the cabinet, and no doubt some bright person will invent yet a faster way of getting bandwidth down a copper pair. So I'm sure we'll see a new version of a ADSL at some point.
Any plans for DNSSEC?
Any plans for DNSSEC? Well, I could do with a bit of help from John or Dave on that one. Have we got any plans to do a DNSSEC?
I think that's I'm perhaps not best to say, actually. My colleague at the back of the room, it's probably more his bag, but I'll commit him to it here. I think actually it's clearly something, as was said earlier today, that a certain type of client will ask for, and we will have to go down that route. So I think yes, we will, with the usual approach we take, which will be to spend time plugging away at it until we get it right. And we can deliver the good service we aim to deliver with it. So I think actually for us, the presentation this morning was very useful. And I think hand in hand with that as well, there are several challenges like that facing us over the coming year or so, because of the difficulties in rolling it out and the impact it has on your end users, their perception of your service. IPv6 is the other big one, which is going to be a terrible minefield. But as an industry, we need to solve those problems. So, yes.
Thanks, Dave. Well, that's an answer I couldn't have given. Any other
Okay.
questions?
Well, I think we want to thank you, Richard, very much, both for contributing to our archive of the history of the internet in the UK, which is always fun and interesting, and just for all the support that you've given in hosting the meeting here today. It's been really nicely done. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome.